Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today, I am honored once again. You guys know I love this guy. Why do I love this guy? Because in as much as we don't agree on all aspects of economics, he has a point of view that I will always listen to. Marlon Weems, aka the Journeyman, a man who spent 30 years in finance, 10 of those on Wall Street, global investment banks, and subsequently hired him to help them decipher developments in the financial and socio-economic landscape. Marlon points out that mainstream news rarely drills down enough to give a true picture of what's happening, let alone what it all means, and henceforth the need for writers like the journeyman Marlon Weems. Welcome to Politics Done Right once again.
Good to be back with you, Egberto.
Yeah, well, today
I'm becoming a friend of the show.
Well, I mean, the first time you appeared on the show, sir, you were a friend of the show.
That got me in.
The becoming is not does not compute. Are computes. You are. Okay, let me start it this way. One of the reasons I asked you to come on is that either you said something about capitalism or I said something about capitalism. And I probably objected to something you said, and you probably objected to something I said. I don't know if it's really an objection other than a clarification.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to, I have been getting very upset at what's been going on. I wrote a piece recently called Insanity, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we have learned how to go into these boom bust cycles, and we've learned how to talk about inflation as if it's real and supply chain as if the government has something to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. And it just got me upset. So you see some of the anti-capitalist notions that I've been going through right now. What are your thoughts, first of all, as far as capitalism, not the way you would want it, but the way that we practice it?
Well, I have written about this, and I call it, American capitalism ain't really capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just give you the answer to your question is you and I probably are closer in agreement than you might think, but there's some areas that we differ.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'm not against socialism because there's so much of it in our system already. I mean, what's Obamacare? What's Social Security? Right. Or, the things that we all collectively share in, like utilities, fire departments, et cetera. The problem that I have with capitalism, and I would say that I'm still a capitalist, not as much as I was when I worked on Wall Street. So, I jokingly say I'm a recovering capitalist or a reformed capitalist. I still believe in it because the alternatives, I don't think, are necessarily much better. They all have pluses and minuses, if you will. So I'm not against socialism, like I said. I'm just not sure the problems that we have in capitalism are fixable by going to socialism. So what I mean by that is, does that solve equality? I think it probably helps, certainly. But I just think humans, by our nature, are gonna grift. We're gonna cheat, And so to me, the problem that is really getting you ticked off and frustrated, as well as me, I think isn't so much to do with capitalism as it is the implementation of it, So what I mean by that is any system, for example, that you have where you just don't regulate what people do, you're going to have problems. You're going to have the same, you understand what I mean? So yeah. There was a video, maybe it was one of your shows it had to be pretty recent, where you were talking about, you played, the allergy season down here in North Carolina.
Here too, man. I hear you.
I don't want to blow your ears out with a sneeze. So, no, you played a video in one of your episodes of Stephanie Rule, and
right.
She was talking about what was going on with Goldman and Russia and so on. See, to me, and this is something that I learned working on Wall Street, whatever the rules are, by nature, people are going to, you know, my grandmother had a saying that water will seek its own level. You
She's
know,
right.
people are going to look for the loophole and they're going to exploit it. They'll do that in Sweden, they'll do it in Venezuela, and they'll do it here. So when you leave the door open for Goldman to do what they're doing, it's not like they're cheating because you set it up that way. So, you know, I just think that what we need to do is reform capitalism and make it more progressive. And one of the things that disenchanted me with working on Wall Street was during the financial crisis, seeing firms that had taken capitalism to the nth degree, right? And then when you know it went wrong, they didn't like capitalism anymore. They needed some socialism.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know,
Exactly.
and everybody, and we used to joke that, you know, Wall Street is capitalism on the way up and socialism on the way down. So, you know, I guess I'll leave it there. I hope I answered your question.
No, no, I think you did a great job. I mean, I'm gonna define something here and say that I think what you pointed out to me, you want all these regulations in, which I think is a must. And I think once you do all of that, capitalism isn't as capital as it is, as you know, as capitalist as it is anymore,
Sure.
right?
Well, I don't
So
really care that
I
I don't
agree.
know. I don't really know that. I don't know that we've ever been 100% capitalist
Right.
because we have, like I said, you know, Wall Street's the last bastion of capitalism till stuff went wrong. And
Hmm.
then it's like, oh, please help us. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
The-
pure capitalism would mean the chips fall where they may and you go out of business or not, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
the way the book version of capitalism is.
Right. There are other aspects of it that are concerning that I want to touch on. But before I touch on that, I just want to ask you another question with regards to bifurcated economies, right? Um, Basically, I think you've said you don't mind it, right? A little bit of all the isms is just fine. Um, I don't go ahead and define myself as like, Berto, you're a socialist because of the connotation that that has. But I
Sure.
have no problem denoting that I am, in fact, a democratic socialist in the same similar view as places like Denmark or Sweden or other places like that.
Hmm.
That we have no problem thinking that they're somehow going to turn into a red China or something like that, right? But um, I think a bifurcated economy is what we need, right? I think essential services to humanity, energy,
Hmm.
energy,
Healthcare.
healthcare, and a few other things should fall under the purview of we the people, the government. And
They
what's
should be
int-
utilities, is
they
what you're
should
saying, right?
exactly. You gave it the economic name. They should be utilities. Now, interestingly, I think also the arguments that many capitalists would make that, well, you throw healthcare into the government arena, you no longer get innovation. You throw energy into the public domain, you no longer get innovation. It irks me that even our media, good media, doesn't set the record straight, that
Right.
actually tells the reality that most innovation occur with government funding
Sure it
because
does.
capitalist companies don't take unnecessary risk. That's why they also buy other companies. They find a little startup that does something and they prove its value. That big company is going to buy it because it's already been proven. The fallacy that supporting these large corporations and making sure that we continuously have policies to support them over and over again, to me seems disingenuous in that most of the development, most of the intellect, most of all these things either come from universities or grants. I mean, I don't know of any corporation who has original design. They may have permutations thereof, but if you could tell me what, I mean, you go into deep oil drilling, you go into what NASA has done to allow for deep oil drilling, etc. It was all government paid for.
Mm. So I agree with you to an extent, which
Okay,
probably is no surprise.
right?
um, so you're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, I did not realize um, just how true what you just said is until a few years ago. I, for a year, was the head of business development for a biotechnology accelerator that was under the well, it existed or and still does within the University of North Carolina system in Wilmington. And so, you know, we had a totally separate campus of buildings and, you know, labs and all this stuff, which I did not touch any of that. I was there basically to attract these little companies that, you know, so you have professors within the university that are working on different projects. And so we basically housed those guys and gave them a place to, you know, to develop and incubate and so on. But during that time, of course, I saw firsthand how, you know, how different drugs get developed in the university. And universities, 9 times out of 10, don't reap near the benefit.
Exactly.
Because they're not really set up to do that. They're really set up to spin it out, you know. And so, yeah, you're right. Now, I would say in healthcare, that's certainly true. But when I think of innovation, and that's the argument for capitalism,
right,
or the argument against less capitalism, let's say,
right,
is that you stifle innovation, which I tend to think that's true to an extent. Now, I may be off, but you give me, I take the example of Apple. You know,
I'm glad you used that example. Yeah,
that's a car. I mean, that's something that started in a garage. You know, now I'm sure at some point the government played a role, because certainly if you're talking smartphones, sooner or later you have to ride on the government infrastructure. You know, but I would say that the idea germinated with some individuals that just sort of built a technology themselves that, you know, changed the landscape.
let me interject.
I'm sorry, you probably have some thoughts on that. But
yeah, let me interject a bit there, because I mean, I don't want to take away anything from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is I consider him more an artist than an intellect, right? In other words, he created a beautiful computer and so forth. Wozniak was sort of the brainiac. And as in everything that occurs in capitalism, the brainiac somehow gets the back door, you know. Steve Jobs was always the guy that everybody could see was a cute guy, you know.
Well, he was very good at the storytelling part of it, the marketing.
Exactly. But then we go to the core, right? The pen and or the mouse and the keyboard, and everybody look at the Apple interface as being, wow, Steve Jobs' creation. Not realizing that Xerox back in the olden days, the mouse, with government intervention and support and all of that, did this. So yeah, the great innovators aren't necessarily the people who reap the profits from it. As an example as well, we see Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and all these guys who have billions in stocks in these companies, but the actual innovators, the people who are the engineers, the physicists, and all of these guys that aren't Steve Jobs and these other guys, they may have their stock options and make a few more bucks than the average American citizen, but they are not the one that capitalism allows to flourish. In other words, Steve Jobs, and let's even look at Bezos, they take my books are sold through Amazon. Come on. And, you know, I mean,
I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay. My books are sold through Amazon. And interestingly, my brother, it's, it doesn't irk me that he makes a piece off of my stuff. It irks me that everything, a piece of it belongs to him. And there is no, because of a flaw, I think, in the system, he has not earned that. So there's a distinct disconnect between a person's worth and what capitalism allows that person to be worth. You follow
So
what I'm saying?
I do absolutely. And what I would say is this: I think your argument is not so much with capitalism; it's against the way we do capitalism in America. So, for example,
Yes.
what you really, I think, would prefer is, and here's the problem:
Hmm.
um, corporate America and the model that everybody, that's the prevailing model or way of thinking about how to distribute wealth
Right.
is a shareholder. You're focused on the shareholder. You're not
Right.
focused on stakeholders.
Right.
Workers would be stakeholders. You see, so I
Yes.
think maybe um, I think maybe Germany might be a good example. You
Yes.
know, the I remember a few years back when they were I can't remember. I think it was in Tennessee. They were
Yes.
talking about building a plant there, and
Right.
of course, I forget the senator that was still in office
I
at the
remember exactly
time,
who you're talking about. Yes.
but yeah, he got in the middle of it because and the folks at Volkswagen were saying we got no problem
With
with
the union.
somebody representing the union being on the board because that's the
Right.
way they do it there. So they have a say, their interests are represented, but we're so wedded to the idea that the only people who should benefit are the people who own shares, as
Right.
opposed to and it's to me that's a reflection of something political, maybe not so much capitalism in and of itself, because you could certainly do it differently.
Hmm.
um, so that's what I would say. And as far as Bezos goes, you saw, I think my most recent piece that I wrote is the title is something like um, the myth or the
Actually, I have it
fiction
right
of
here.
the self-made billionaire.
The fiction of the self. I haven't read it because I just went into Twitter and saw the message here, but I got to go find it. Is it on Medium or Substack or where is it
It's
at?
it's on both. It's on both.
Okay.
You can go to Medium, and that's probably the easiest one. But
Well, let me
the
just let you know. Let me let you
sure,
everybody know beforehand. I'm a paid member. Of Medium, so anytime I read your stuff, you get paid. Just saying.
yeah, yeah, that's good old capitalism, man.
But I
But
look at that. I look at that as I get value. I get value. You get
sure,
value, right? My
and if my stuff is substandard, nobody's going to read it,
Nobody's going to read it, right?
and
And
I'm
that's a
I'm
whole.
fine with that.
But and I'm glad that you just said that, brother Weems, because here is what gets me. The value that Bezos was able to capital. I don't know if I ever told you the story. When I just started my business, I think back in the late 80s, early 90s,
Hmm.
I wrote software. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I wrote software and I created this thing that was just online. It was when the internet was just coming out, new stuff.
Hmm.
And I was creating a shopping cart for the web. I had to
Okay.
can the idea because of what I was when I did a patent search just for the somebody suggested I do it or something like that. Jeff Bezos patented one click. So anybody who tried to
Okay.
implement a cart in that fashion, one click, something that he probably doesn't even know to write himself as an electrical engineer, which is what he
Sure.
is, right? So he patented that, and by holding folks back on carts and all those things, Bezos took over the market. A lot of people don't know that story, right?
Oh,
And
it's very similar to Facebook buying up
yes,
all the little, the thumbs up thing was
right,
Friendster, I think it was,
yes, yes.
and they just bought that up, and then they bought WhatsApp, they bought Instagram,
So
and in my opinion, screwed them all up. But that's
yeah,
yeah. I mean, so but again, that is back to my little. I don't think it's a theory. It's just my observation
hmm
that people do what the market, the government, they do what we let them get away with.
oh,
So
and that's
so
why I do what I do because I'm
so
trying to enlighten people not to do that. But go ahead, yes.
yeah, well, so um, we're in a situation now where you've basically got, was it Teddy Roosevelt was the trust buster, right?
Yes, yes,
I mean, because that's what we got now. We've got,
yes.
see, capitalism's supposed to be all about competition too.
Hmm.
Innovation, competition, free enterprise, free market. We don't do that. I mean, think about it. I think the top, I want to say, if you look at the poultry market or the meat,
Yeah,
you got Smithfield, Tyson, and
yeah,
what's the other, JBL. It's
right.
like 4 people that got
Yes,
40% of the market.
actually more.
That you're supposed to
Yeah,
break that up, but we
yeah,
don't do it.
right.
You know, um, we see. You mentioned Elon Musk a minute ago. That's the guy that drives me crazy. And look, of course, he's a smart guy. He's probably a genius. All this stuff can be true, but the government has propped this guy up for years. I mean, one contract after another. So all I'm saying is, are are there not maybe 3 or 4 other guys? Is there not a woman that maybe some that could also have gotten some of that?
Let me tell
I don't
you,
know.
let me no, it's I think you do know, sir. Let me just say something that I feel, okay? I've met you recently and I've spoken to you and I consider you a very, very smart person. I have also, read a whole lot about Steve Jobs. I read a whole lot about Bezos, read a whole lot about Elon Musk and all these guys. And in America, it seems like if you learn the rules of capitalism, it is unnecessary to be all that smart. Of course, Donald Trump is the epitome of that, right? Okay. But
Sorry,
what,
yeah,
what the reason I'm saying that is that I look at what Bezos did. I could have done it. I look at
sure,
what Bill Gates did. I know hundreds of my engineering brothers who could have done that. What they didn't have were two things: capital
yep,
and capitalist know-how. And it's amazing that both capital and capitalist know-how in America or trumps
I would
everything.
say I would add on to that, and this may be a subset of that capitalist know-how.
Uh-huh.
It's access, and see, as
That's a better word, sir. That's a better word. Yes, you're right.
well,
Yes.
and let me, if I can just kind of, so what I write about is what, it's not unique to me, but it's just my observation is that there is an intersection between, um, the economy, politics, and at least in my estimation, let's call it racism.
Uh-huh.
And so, for example, had you been just as smart as Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, you pick, your blackness would have prevented you, um, statistically. Certainly there are some black people that have excelled. You got Bob Johnson, you got
Yeah.
different folks, you got Oprah. But what I'm saying is the system is built in such a way to elevate the Bezoses and to, keep
I
the,
want to
other
I want to
folks down.
move your words a step further. And I mean this from the depths of my heart. And I am not saying this otherwise. I think you are and I am no less smart than those people that you've mentioned. And I'm not even saying that
Sure.
to be cocky. I'm not
No,
saying that
no,
to say of anything. I'm just
it
saying
is. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you.
what you and I know, uh, technically speaking, what I know. Okay, I'm not sure, but I don't know if you're an engineer or not, but I know
I am
you're
not.
a fine, but I know you're a finance guy who knows how the system operates. I know that. So what I'm saying is, in each of our domains, I don't think any of these guys, and by the way, I have an audience at Politics Done Right, and
Sure.
most of the people in my audience, uh, I consider those people, and when I tell them this, I sometimes think, do they think I'm just trying to butter them up? I'm not. And the reason why is the places that I've worked for NASA, I've worked in the oil industry, I've worked in all these domains, and I've rubbed shoulders with all these people from Harvard, Princeton, all these guys, right? And what was amazing to me was the aura matching the deeds. The aura never matched the deeds. And that word that you corrected me on, Marlon, when you said you would put it a different way, access. That's what we're talking about there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what we're
I'll
talking
give you an
about.
example just to your point. So I worked on Wall Street for 13 years. I guess the last 5 years, I ran an algorithmic trading operation. So we, you hear about program trades and all the complicated stuff. So that's what we did, quantitative trading, for some of the biggest players that exist, biggest pension funds, biggest hedge funds, the whole thing. And then, of course, when we had the financial crisis, that kind of rejiggered everything, So I left New York. Sometimes, circumstances make the decision for you.
Yes, for you, right.
But we had talked about at that point, it's kind of like playing football when you know it's time.
Right.
And my kids were getting, in age to a place where we wanted a little different lifestyle. So I'm from Arkansas. I didn't want to go back that far south. At the time, I thought that I was.
But Arkansas is beautiful, sir.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful. I've still got family there, but having come from New York, New Jersey, that was just too much of an unwind for me. Yeah. So I thought, well, okay, I've run trading operations on Wall Street. I shouldn't have any trouble, finding a spot in Charlotte, which is a money center.
Right.
Certainly Raleigh, dude. I could barely get interviews.
Right.
And look, I had a trifecta going. I mean, it was I'm Black, and age was probably another factor.
Right.
And I would hear that I was overqualified.
Right.
And what that meant
well, that's a magic word. Yeah.
Yeah. The guy who's hiring is looking at me as potentially coming in, taking his job.
Right.
So all those factors, and who's to say which one is the most, but technology works both ways. So I started to observe when, my people are hitting my resume and there's interest. And then I noticed they've gone to LinkedIn and they see my picture.
Right. Right.
Then suddenly,
right.
Well, we don't know.
Right.
We're already looking at some people, etc.
Right.
And so the thing about capitalism, I guess, is that I just made the decision. Okay, I'm going to take what I know and do something else with it. And you have that flexibility. And I guess one of the beautiful things now is how information is so democratized. Right. That what we're doing right now, years ago, say 30, 40 years ago, we had to be working at a TV station to do this.
Do it, yeah.
Exactly. Someone had to allow us
to do it. Now we naturally get for people, and this is what I find, and I'm honored. I just say this, I'm honored. I have a small audience, but I'm honored to have an audience. And when I say small, small is relative, right? But I mean, interestingly, what I've noticed is when you come across as honest, whether it is somebody who believes that you're full of it because you're completely anti-capitalist in the way it works, once you get that respect, doesn't matter who the person is. I think you've articulated that several times before with some of the people that follow your work, including myself. I follow your work. So I mean, I think that is important. And to your point, the democratization that technology has allowed gives us this platform. But because we don't own enough of this platform, it can be taken away.
Sure. Yeah. That's
You know?
always
And
in the
that's where the
background.
capitalism portion of what I talk about, because I know for a fact that my stuff, many of my stuff gets throttled on the internet because
Hmm.
of certain subjects that I cover, right? Capitalism, one of the major subjects. And I think what's going to be important is, as you said earlier, is that we're going to have things like regulations that prevent them, that treats this, what we are on, as a utility of really truly free expression, as
Sure.
opposed to something these private entities control and can decide who will have the honor of being elevated. Because when we talk about capitalism, when I talk about it, when I preach about it, I talk about it being a system where you have to be invited into it. And I'm not pure, you're not pure. I've had stocks, I've had bonds, I've had these different instruments, these different capitalist instruments. But the fact of the matter is, ultimately, I think we have to find some different mode of operation, because two things, and then we're going to have to kind of, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, because you and I can talk forever. I just looked at the time and realized that we can
Sure.
talk forever. But I think we're going to have to put some limits here, because we can't have the 1% of the population growing at 10% a year, the 5% of the population growing at 7% of the year, and it's a mathematical impossibility to continue those things. Likewise, we can't expect that the oil that's found on public lands should only be given to just a few people who decided to own shares. Another concept, and then I'm done. What gets to me is that, and I said it in my past before, whenever I say I let my money work for me, it's nothing more than saying I'm a good abstracted slave owner. And with that, I ask you, sir, to give us a closing of our show with a test, with a free form discussion of capitalism.
I don't, as I said earlier, I don't disagree with much of what you said. I think perhaps our only difference is the how to fix it. Is it, see, I don't see a world in which Twitter or YouTube become utilities. And I think that's more of a constitutional issue than anything. But at the same time, you know, see, and man, I hate using this, the slippery slope thing. So if you can't regulate who has access to a YouTube or a Twitter, then you have conspiracy theorists and you have Russian bots all over the place spitting out false information. So I don't think either of us want that.
No,
But
no.
at the same time, what should happen is a politics done right, or a journeyman should have just as much ability to rise up the ladder as I don't know, if you go on Facebook, you see the top the top groups on Facebook, and they're pretty much all very far right
Hmm.
leaning, et cetera, because that's how Facebook gets paid the
Right.
most. So I don't know exactly. Well, I do know it's regulatory. That's
Hmm.
the thing. But those kinds of regulations um, seem not to succeed because the people who talk the loudest say that's
Right.
socialism.
Well,
And
look.
so what we really need, just to sum up, I think what we really need is better representation, because the people who don't want this do a much better job of marketing and screaming loud and so forth, as opposed. And look, certainly there are people on the left that do a good job, but I think by and large, that side of the fence does a relatively poor job messaging
Hmm.
and telling people what you're saying and what we're talking about. So maybe we should just keep talking, I guess, right?
Actually, you know what? That's how I was going to close. I was going to say, first of all, anytime I talk to you, well, when I talk to good folk, I always try to learn something. So I always learn from these conversations from everybody that I interview, from my audience, I make sure to learn something. So first of all, thank you for appearing here and
Thanks for having me.
bringing that perspective. Secondly, we are going to do this more often if you're willing to do so, because I think
Absolutely.
later on we'll probably make it a little bit more topical so that
Sure.
we have a specific topic. But I just want to thank you for being here on Politics Done Right again, and thank you for sharing my audience your thoughts. I think but they've learned quite a bit of what goes on here in America. So, Mr. Marlon Weems, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
My pleasure.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.